2020 Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris is pushing back on a claim from a powerful member of her party. It's South Carolina Congressman Jim Clyburn's suggestion that Mayor Pete Buttigieg is struggling to gain traction with black voters, in part because he's gay.
I'm talking about a trope that has developed among some. And the reality is that, sadly and unfortunately, in all communities, bias occurs, and in particular, homophobia and transphobia. I've spent my entire career fighting against it. So I know it is a fact, but to label one community in particular as being burdened by this bias as compared to others is misinformed, it's misdirected, and it's just simply wrong.
I want to bring in Jason Johnson, politics editor at The Root. He's also an MSNBC political contributor. And Maria Hinojosa, she is the anchor and executive producer of NPR's Latino USA. Thanks to both of you. Jason, to be clear, Clyburn said that he thinks Mayor Pete's sexuality is an issue for older African Americans in his state, South Carolina, in my state. He also said that the younger black voters that he knows don't see it as an issue as much, adding that his grandson actually works on Buttigieg's campaign. Do you agree more with what Clyburn said, that it's a generational issue, or do you think that Senator Harris is right here?
Well, Craig, I think there's multi-levels to this. I don't think it's fair or reasonable to say that just because people are older, they're more likely to be homophobic. And I tend to agree more with Senator Harris that it quite frankly, and I don't say this from Clyburn, but this message has been delivered by more people than just Clyburn. There was a leaked focus group report last week from the Buttigieg campaign. They didn't leak it themselves, but that supposedly said that African-American voters are more likely to have issues with him one way or another. It is racist and it is ignorant to assume that African-Americans are any more homophobic than any other group of people in this country. It is ignorant to assume, no insult to the sitting congressman, that just because people are older, that they're less inclined to support someone who happens to be part of the LGBTQ community. To be fair, Mayor Pete's biggest problem with black voters is his own record. It's the fact that he's 37. It's the fact that he's the mayor of a small town that most people have never heard of. It's the fact that he fired the first black police chief in South Bend, Indiana, and that he didn't handle the shooting of Eric Logan very well this summer. Those are the things that damage him with black voters. And I think to the degree that we make this sort of about identity issues, I think it is an insulting way to talk about the black community. So I lean more with Senator Harris. I understand what Congressman Clyburn is saying, but I don't think that generalization can really be made about black voters in South Carolina or anywhere else.
What's your sense, Maria? I mean, when you talk to voters, do you get the sense that this is an issue on any level?
You know what this reminds me of?
Yeah.
When I was hearing people saying things like, Mexicans will never vote for a black man. Latinos will never vote for a black man. And it's these tropes that get out there. And then they get amplified by people who actually are not in the community. So Jason is right. I mean, like in any community within our own...
To be fair, though, Clyburn is in that community. I mean,
Yes, and then what I was going to say is that in our own communities, in our own families, we are struggling with this on a daily. All of our families have people, members who are coming out, and we're figuring out this and that. So it is a family conversation. It is a community conversation, but it's no more happening in the African-American community than it is in the Latino community. And to just kind of continue to amplify this, by the way, I think that Kamala coming out and kind of coming to a competitor's defense is frankly refreshing. It's something that we don't see, a sense of like we're going to stand up together to certain things. But I agree with Jason. Pete Buttigieg's problem is that, I just said it, Pete Buttigieg's problem, so yeah. I was able to say that all in one, is that he's going to have to go to South Carolina and put in the groundwork as he's done in Iowa, because he's going to have to show and he's going to have to be in the community, and that takes work.
You mentioned, Maria, Senator Kamala Harris. Politico did this profile. I'm not sure if you caught it, but and this is their words on how she went from female Obama to 5th place. Senator Harris pointing to questions about her electability because of her gender, because of her race. Why do you think that the senator has had some trouble gaining traction?
Look, I mean, this is a $64,000 question, certainly for her and for a lot of people. There are women who I know, and this is what I've heard them say: I would love to love Kamala. I would love to love her because there's so much about her that we love, the way she kind of answers and holds her power. but you have a record that you're really going to have to parse through. And I know that when I've said this in the past, people come after me on Twitter because I don't want to assume that I'm attacking Kamala at all. I'm just saying that she, like Pete Buttigieg, is going to have to do the hard groundwork. In her case, like Buttigieg, it's kind of owning up to things that they've done in the past, as Jason brought up.
Let them come after you on Twitter. We don't care about that.
I find a lot of love on Twitter, too, so I like all the love.
We don't care about that here. Well, Jason, what say you to that idea that one of the reasons that perhaps the senator from California has had difficulty catching on is because of her record as a prosecutor?
Well, that's part of it, Craig, but I want to be clear about a couple things with Senator Harris. This is an African-American woman from California running for president of the United States. She would have to run a perfect campaign in this country to even have a chance at the nomination because of structural racism, because of attitudes about gender and race amongst the voting population, including Democrats, let alone Republicans, and unfortunately, sometimes even members of the press. So she had a very, very high threshold, a lot of needles that she was going to have to thread in order to get this position. So there were things that were against her that aren't necessarily her fault. On the other hand, I think that the Harris campaign didn't adequately address criminal justice early in her campaign. And that not only made her weak to certain members of some progressive Democrats who are like, hey, we really want aggressive criminal justice reform, and they see her as being part of the system that was part of the problem, but it also harmed her with African-American men, and it harmed her with African-American women who didn't think that she was serious enough about this issue. Now, I will say this about the Harris campaign. While some of her drops are her own fault, strategic mistakes, and some are structural, the fact of the matter is we have the report out of South Carolina yesterday that a member of Tom Steyer's staff stole the volunteer list from the Harris campaign. You don't steal from the kid who's failing in class. You steal from the kid who's going ahead. So clearly, there are people who still think that Harris has a pretty good chance in South Carolina. Otherwise, you wouldn't be going after her volunteer list.
You're right. You don't copy the answers from the kid. That's a good point. All right, we'll leave it there. Jason, thank you. Always enjoy it. Maria, thank you so much. Safe travels. Can common ground be found